There is a small brass bell above the door of a tailor's shop on Chestnut Street, and tonight, just before closing, it rang. It is an old bell, worn soft at the edges, and over 50 years it has announced weddings and funerals, first suits and last ones, the proud and the nervous and the quietly broke. The man who has listened to it all that time looked up from his workbench, a needle held still between his fingers, and saw a young stranger standing in the doorway with a torn coat folded over his arms like something wounded. Neither of them knew it yet, but inside the lining of that coat, in a pocket no one had opened in a long while, there was a small folded square of paper, and that paper had been waiting 55 years to be read out loud. Welcome to the Lamplit Hour, where every story is a small light left on for someone who needs it. If stories like this bring you comfort, take a moment to subscribe and stay a while. So let me turn the sign in the window to closed and let the rest of the town go dark, and let us stay here, you and I, in the one shop on the street that still has its light on. Let me tell you about the tailor and the coat. And the night a young man came in from the cold. The tailor's name was Walter Hollis, and he was 74 years old. He had been mending clothes since he was a boy, and he had been doing it on Chestnut Street, in this same narrow shop with the high tin ceiling, for the better part of 50 years. The shop was not much to look at, and Walter would have been the first to tell you so. There was a long wooden counter, worn pale, where 10,000 hands had rested on it. There was a cast iron sewing machine, black as a stove, with gold letters nearly rubbed away. There were spools of thread in every color a person could want, arranged on the wall in tall wooden racks, reds beside rusts beside the soft grays of winter. There was a tailor's dummy in the corner that Walter had named years ago simply Stanley, because a thing you talk to every day ought to have a name. And there was the lamp. The lamp sat at the end of the workbench, an old brass thing with a green glass shade, and it threw a circle of warm gold light onto the wood. And into that circle, Walter pulled every piece of work he ever did. Outside that circle, the shop went soft and brown and dim, the shelves fading into shadow, the front window holding the last blue of the evening. But inside it, in that small, warm ring of light, everything was clear. The eye of a needle, the grain of a thread, the careful path a seam wanted to take if you only had the patience to follow it. Walter had spent his whole life leaning into that light, and his shoulders had curved gently over the years to meet it, the way a tree leans toward a window. He lived alone now, above the shop, up a narrow staircase that creaked in the same 3 places it had always creaked. His wife, Ruth, had climbed those stairs beside him for 46 years, and she had been gone for 4. People in town still asked after her sometimes, out of habit, and Walter never minded. He would say, "She's resting now," and he would smile, and that was the truth as he chose to carry it. In the evenings when the work was done, he would make a pot of tea strong enough to stand a spoon in, the way she used to make it, and he would sit by the window upstairs and watch the street lights come on one by one down the length of Chestnut Street. It was a quiet life. It was, he often thought, a good one. He had warm hands and useful work, and a roof that did not leak, and at his age, he had learned that those 3 things taken together are very close to everything a person truly needs. But the trade was dying, and Walter knew it. He was not bitter about it, only clear-eyed. People did not mend things anymore. When a coat tore, they threw it away and bought another, and the new one was cheaper than the thread it would have taken to fix the old one. There had been 4 tailors on this street when Walter was young. There had been 2 when he opened his own door. Now there was him, and only him, the last lit window on a street of shops that sold telephones and coffee and things he did not fully understand. Some weeks he mended a hem and shortened a pair of trousers, and that was all. Some weeks no bell rang at all. He kept the shop open anyway, because a man has to have somewhere to put his hands, and because a part of him still believed, stubbornly, the way you believe in something your father told you, that as long as one light stayed on for the mending of things, the whole idea of mending was not yet lost. So when the bell rang that evening, just before he meant to close, Walter set down his needle and stood up a little straighter than his back wanted him to, and he said, the way he always said it, come in, you're not too late." The young man in the doorway looked too late to himself. He looked, in fact, like someone who had been arriving too late his whole young life. He was perhaps 22 or 23, thin in the way that comes from worry rather than from health, with a wool cap pulled down and his ears red from the cold. He held the coat against his chest with both arms, and he hesitated on the threshold, the way people do when they are about to ask for something and they are not sure they have the right. "It's my father's coat," the young man said. It was my father's." Walter nodded slowly. He had learned over 50 years that the first thing a person says is rarely the whole of it, and that the kindest thing you can do is leave a little silence after it, a place for the rest to come if it wants to. He pulled out the tall stool that sat by the counter and tipped his head toward it, an invitation, and after a moment the young man came in and sat, and the door swung shut behind him, and the brass bell gave one last soft note and went still. "Lay it here," Walter said, patting the counter. "Let's have a look at the patient." The young man almost smiled at that. He laid the coat out on the worn wood under the edge of the lamplight and smoothed it once with his hand, gently, the way you might smooth a blanket over someone sleeping. It was a good coat, or it had been once. A heavy charcoal wool, double-breasted, the kind of coat they made to last a lifetime, back when a lifetime was the unit they measured things in. But it had not been cared for in some time. The right shoulder seam had given way, splitting along 4 or 5 inches so the lining showed through like a wound. 2 of the buttons were gone, the left cuff was fraying, and there was a small burn near the hem, and the whole of it smelled faintly of a closet that had been shut a long while, of cedar and dust, and the ghost of a cologne. Walter put on his glasses and bent close, turning the shoulder toward the light, and he made the low humming sound he always made when he was looking at a thing properly, a sound like a man greeting an old friend across a crowded room. "My name's Daniel," the young man said, as if he had just remembered that people gave their names. "I just moved here. There's a job at the lumber yard, the office part, on Monday morning. I wanted to look." He stopped and turned his cap around in his hands. "I don't have much," he said finally. "I should tell you that first. I don't have much to pay you with. I just thought, before I spent it on a new one, I'd ask if this one could be saved. It was his. I'd rather wear his. If this story is staying with you, a quiet like, helps me keep the lamp lit for others." Walter did not answer right away. He was still looking at the coat, but he was no longer only looking at the coat. He was looking at the careful way the young man had folded it, and the way he kept one hand resting on the sleeve as though to reassure it, and the red ears, and the worry thinness, and the words, "I'd rather wear his." And somewhere far back in Walter Hollis, in a room he did not visit very often, a small light came on. "Of course it can be saved," Walter said. "There's almost nothing made by hand that can't be saved by hand. That's the secret of the whole trade, if you want to know it." He straightened up and took off his glasses and looked at Daniel directly. "And we won't talk about paying tonight," he said. "A first coat for a new job is a particular kind of thing. Let an old man do one particular thing right before he closes up. You'd be doing me the favor, truthfully. It's been a slow week, and I'd rather mend than sit." Daniel started to protest, the way people do, and Walter waved it off with the back of his hand, the way tailors do, and that was the end of it. The young man sat back on the stool. The old man pulled the coat into the gold ring of light, and the work began. There is a particular peace in watching someone do with great care a thing they have done 10,000 times. Walter threaded his needle without seeming to look at it, the thread finding the eye the way water finds the low place in a field. He turned the coat inside out and laid the torn shoulder open and studied how it had come apart, the way a doctor reads an old wound to understand the fall that made it. He talked while he worked, low and easy, not really needing answers, and Daniel listened. And outside the window, the blue went out of the evening, and the street went dark, and the streetlights came on one by one, and still the one warm window on Chestnut Street stayed lit. "A coat like this," Walter said, drawing the first long stitch. "This is a coat somebody believed in. You can tell, the way the shoulders are cut, the weight of the wool. Nobody makes a coat this heavy unless they mean for it to outlast them. He's still in the cut of it, your father. A tailor put his hands here, and your father wore it for 30 years, and now here it is on my bench, and a little of both of them is still in it. That's not a sad thing, son. That's the opposite of a sad thing. That's the whole point." Daniel said quietly. He didn't talk much. "My father, we didn't. It wasn't bad between us. It just wasn't much. He worked, and he came home tired, and he wore that coat, and then he got sick. And then he was gone, and I realized I never really knew him. All I've got is the coat." Walter nodded, his needle never stopping. The lamplight moved on his glasses. "Then you've got more than you think," he said. "A coat tells you things a man won't. This burn here by the hem." He leaned away from a fire he liked to stand close to. "These cuffs, worn just here." He was a man who rested his arms on a railing or a fence or the edge of a porch and looked at something for a long time. This inside pocket, see how it's stretched soft and shaped. He kept something here against his heart, and he kept it a long while. Walter smiled gently. "Your father will tell you about himself for years yet, if you learn to listen to the coat. I've buried men I knew only by their hems and learned more at the burial than I'd known in life." And it was then, as he spoke of the inside pocket, that Walter's own fingers, working along the lining, found something, a small resistance, a folded shape, tucked deep into the breast pocket on the left side, the pocket nearest where a heart would be. He paused. He looked at Daniel, who had not noticed, who was looking at the spools of thread on the wall with the soft, tired face of a young man a long way from home. And carefully, the way you lift a moth from a windowsill, Walter drew the folded square of paper out into the light. It was old, not as old as the coat, but old. The paper had gone the color of weak tea, and the folds had worn nearly through, and it had clearly been folded and unfolded many, many times by a hand that came back to it often. Walter held it a moment without opening it. "Some things you ask permission for, even from the dead. I think," Walter said softly, "your father left something in his coat." Daniel turned. Walter held out the folded paper across the counter into the ring of lamplight between them, and the young man took it with both hands and unfolded it slowly and read it and went very still. I won't tell you yet exactly what it said. Let it stay folded in the boy's hands a moment longer, the way it stayed folded in the coat all those years, because something was happening to the old tailor on his side of the lamp that I want you to see first. Walter Hollis had gone still too, but not because of the words on the paper, which he had not read. He had gone still because of the paper itself, the color of it, the wear of the folds, the particular way a thing looks when it has been carried against a heart for decades, taken out in hard hours and read and put away again. He knew that look. He knew it the way you know your own handwriting in a stranger's drawer, because Walter Hollis was carrying a piece of paper exactly like it at that very moment in the breast pocket of his own worn cardigan, where it had lived for 55 years. And his hand went to it now, without his quite deciding to. His old fingers slipped into the pocket over his own heart and found the soft folded square he had carried since he was 19 years old. And the shop around him seemed to lean back and grow larger and darker, and the lamp seemed to burn down to a single point. And Walter Hollis was for a moment no longer 74 and no longer in Linden at all. He was 19, and he was cold, and he was standing in the doorway of a tailor's shop in a city far from here, a long, long time ago. Let me tell you about that, because it is the heart of the whole thing, and because the boy on the stool is still reading, and we have a little time. When Walter Hollis was 19, he had nothing. I do not say that the way people say it lightly. I mean, he had a cardboard suitcase and $11 and one coat, and the coat was a thin gray thing, 2 sizes too big, that had come from a church box, and it did almost nothing against the wind. He had come to the city to find work because there was none where he came from, and he had found instead the particular loneliness of a place where 10,000 windows are lit, and not one of them is lit for you. He slept where he could, he ate when he could, and he had a letter folded in his pocket from the only man who would see him, the manager of a freight company, who had said, "Come Monday morning, clean and decent, and we'll see about a job." But Walter was not clean and decent. He was cold and frayed, and his one coat had torn at the shoulder, squeezing through a gap in a fence to find a dry place to sleep. And on the Saturday before that Monday, he stood in front of his reflection in a dark shop window and understood with the flat certainty of the young and poor that he would not get the job. Not because he could not do it, because he looked like exactly what he was, a boy with nothing, and the world has a way of giving things to those who already look as though they have them. He was standing there, looking at the torn shoulder of his coat in the glass, when the door of the shop beside him opened, and an old man leaned out into the cold and looked at him. The old man's name was Mr. Bauer. He was a tailor, and he was closing for the night, and he had been watching the boy stand in front of his window for a while. He did not ask Walter what was wrong. He looked at the coat the way tailors do, reading it in a glance, and he understood the whole of it, the fence and the Monday and the $11 and the rest. And he said, in an accent Walter could not place, come in, you're not too late." Walter said he had no money. He said it fast, to get the shame over with, and Mr. Bauer waved it off with the back of his hand, the way tailors do, and pulled the boy in out of the wind and sat him on a stool by the counter and turned the brass lamp toward the work and said, "Lay it here. Let's have a look at the patient." It took him most of 2 hours. He did not hurry, though it was late and he was old and surely tired. He mended the shoulder so the seam was stronger than it had been new. He found 2 buttons in a jar that nearly matched and sewed them on. He turned the cuffs and pressed the whole coat with a heavy iron until the steam rose and the wool lay down clean and dark. And when he held it up at the end, in the lamplight, it was not a new coat, but it was a coat a man could wear into a room and keep his head up. And while he worked, he talked, low and easy, not needing answers, about thread and wool and the way a thing made by hand can always be saved by hand. Walter never forgot a word of it. He built his whole life out of it, though he did not know that yet. When it was done, Mr. Bauer helped the boy into the coat and turned him toward the dark window to see himself, and Walter looked at the young man in the glass and did not recognize him, because the young man in the glass looked like someone things might be given to. And Walter tried to thank him and could not find the size of words it needed, and the old tailor saw that and saved him from it. He reached into his own pocket and took out a slip of paper and a stub of a pencil, and he wrote something slowly and folded it once and tucked it into the inside breast pocket of the mended coat over the boy's heart, and patted it twice with his flat old hand. "Don't read it now," Mr. Bauer said. "Read it Monday, before you go in, and then keep it." He smiled. Everybody should carry one thing in their coat that tells them who they are. Walter got the job on Monday. He read the note first, standing in a cold doorway, and then he went in clean and decent with his head up, and the manager shook his hand, and the long, ordinary miracle of an ordinary life began to unfold from that morning the way a coat unfolds from a tailor's arms. But Walter did not stay in freight. He saved and he learned, and within a few years he had found an old tailor to take him on and teach him the trade, because he had decided in that doorway on that Monday that whatever else he did with his life, he would spend it on the other side of that lamp. He would be the one who leaned out the door into the cold. He would be the one who said, "Come in, you're not too late." He had been kept warm, and a man who has been kept warm, he had come to believe, owes the world the keeping of someone else. That was the note. That was what Mr. Bauer had written 55 years ago, in pencil, on a slip of paper that Walter Hollis had carried in the breast pocket of every coat and every cardigan he had owned since, unfolding it in the hard hours and folding it back until the paper had gone the color of weak tea and the creases had worn nearly through. It said, in a careful, old-fashioned hand, "A man kept warm can keep his head up. When you are able, keep someone else warm." That is the whole of the trade. That is the whole of everything. And now, here was Walter, 74 years old, on the other side of the lamp at last, with that same paper over his own heart, and a cold boy on the stool in front of him, and a mended coat between them, and the boy unfolding a note from his own dead father, and the whole circle of it closing so quietly in that small gold ring of light that neither of them could have said the moment it came round. Daniel finished reading. He folded the paper back along its soft old creases very carefully, and he held it in both hands and did not look up for a while. When he did, his eyes were wet, but he was not quite crying. He had the look of a young man who has just been handed something he will spend years growing into. "It's from him," Daniel said. "From my dad. I didn't know he—" Walter waited in the silence after the first words, the place for the rest to come. "It's not even to me," Daniel said. "It's older than me. Somebody must have given it to him. He kept it. All those years he kept it in the coat, and he never said." "He didn't have to say," Walter said gently. "He wore it. That's a kind of saying, the loudest kind there is, from a quiet man." And then Walter did a thing he could not afterward fully explain, except that 55 years had been pushing him toward it. He reached into his own breast pocket and took out his own folded square of paper. Gone, the same color of weak tea, worn along the same soft creases, and he laid it on the counter beside the one in Daniel's hands, in the ring of lamplight, the two of them side by side, and Daniel looked at them, the two old folded papers, twins across half a century, and looked up at the old man and began slowly to understand the shape of what he was sitting inside of. "Mine's older than yours," Walter said and smiled. "A man gave it to me when I was about your age and had a torn coat and a job on Monday and nothing else in the world. I've carried it ever since. He kept me warm, and I've spent 50 years trying to pay it forward one coat at a time." He nodded at the paper in Daniel's hands. "And it looks like somebody, somewhere along the line, kept your father warm too. And he carried the proof of it against his heart until the day he died, and then he left it in the coat for you to find." He looked at the young man steadily. "You come from a long line of people who were kept warm, Daniel. That's a better inheritance than money. You'll see." Then he turned back to the coat. There was a little finishing still to do, the last buttons, a final press, and as he worked, the old habit rose in him, the one Mr. Bauer had planted 55 years before, and Walter took up a fresh slip of paper and the stub of a pencil he kept by the machine. And slowly, in his own careful, old-fashioned hand, he wrote something out. He folded it once. And while Daniel was looking away at the streetlights coming on down the length of Chestnut Street, Walter tucked the new note deep into the inside breast pocket of the mended coat over where the boy's heart would be, and patted it twice with his flat old hand, the way it had been done for him so long ago in a city far from here. He did not tell Daniel it was there. Some things you leave for a person to find on their own on a cold morning when they need it. That is part of the gift. That is perhaps the whole of the gift. When the coat was finished, Walter held it up in the lamplight. Charcoal wool, clean and dark and whole again, the shoulders stronger than new. And he helped the young man into it and turned him toward the dark front window to see himself. And Daniel looked at the young man in the glass, standing straight in his father's mended coat, and Walter watched his face change, watched him not recognize himself, watched him become, in that reflection, someone things might be given to. It is the same face every time. Walter had seen it on himself once, 55 years ago, and he had spent his whole life learning to put it on other people, and it had never once stopped being the most beautiful thing he knew how to make. At the door, Daniel tried to thank him and could not find the size of words it needed, and Walter saw that and saved him from it, the way he had been saved. "Go on home," he said. "Get some sleep. You've got a job Monday, and a good coat to wear into it, and a father who left you more than you knew." He held the door, and the brass bell rang its soft, worn note. "Come back and see me sometime," he said. "Tell me how Monday goes. I'll leave the light on." And the young man stepped out into the cold with his head up and walked off down Chestnut Street under the streetlights in his father's coat, with two notes now folded over his heart, the old one and the new one, though he only knew yet about the old. Walter watched him go until the dark took him. Then he turned the sign in the window to closed and stood a moment in the quiet of his shop among the spools of thread and the patient shape of Stanley in the corner and the green shaded lamp burning its small gold circle on the worn wood of a bench he had leaned over for 50 years. He was tired in his back and his hands, the good tiredness of work done right. He folded his own old note along its soft creases and put it back in the pocket over his heart, where it would stay. And before he climbed the stairs that creaked in the same 3 places they had always creaked, to make a pot of tea strong enough to stand a spoon in, the way Ruth used to make it, and to sit by the window and watch the streetlights down the length of the street, Walter Hollis did the last thing he did every night, the thing he had done every night for 50 years and meant to go on doing for as long as his hands still worked. He left the light on, the one lit window on a dark street, for the mending of things, in case anyone should come in from the cold and need to keep their head up. Because the trade was dying, and the world threw away what it could have saved, and one old man with warm hands could not do much against all of that. But he could do one particular thing right. He could keep one light on, and as long as one light stayed on for the mending of things, the whole idea of mending was not yet lost. If you are still here with me in the quiet, let that be the thing you carry off to sleep tonight, that you have very probably been kept warm by someone, a word, a kindness, a mended place in your life you did not even know was torn, and that the debt of it is not paid backward but forward, one coat at a time, one cold doorway at a time, to whoever comes in next. There is a light on for you. There has always been a light on for you. And when you are able, you will leave one on for someone else. Thank you for spending this hour with me. If you'd like more stories like this one, subscribe. And I'll leave the light on for you next time. Rest well.